and continuing Russian military build-up on the Ukrainian border.
Yet more Russian military vehicles being moved towards Ukraine.
Many here in Ukraine worry that this could be a dress rehearsal for some sort of invasion.
Tensions are growing, with potentially catastrophic consequences.
Now to the rising fears this morning. Moscow appears to be setting the stage for an attack.
Boris Johnson has warned Vladimir Putin that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be a disastrous, violent
Lots of its weaponry and equipment at the border could invade at any time. The situation is certainly critical.
Dell'Ucraina da parte di Vladimir Putin. Allora, queste
мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Ее цель – защита людей, которые на протяжении 8 лет подвергаются издевательствам, геноциду со стороны киевского режима.
At the moment when the first strikes hit Ukraine, at the early days of 24th of February, it was reminiscent of Hitler's invasion on the Soviet Union.
Here we go.
My immediate thought was all of the dangers that are facing not only Ukraine, but all of us.
Basically, that the whole country just saw the unthinkable happen.
We're now into completely uncharted territory.
So I woke up and I checked my phone where it was saying Putin declared war of us. People are super scared because nobody knows what to do.
In the early hours of Thursday morning, thousands of Russian troops enter Ukraine from borders in the north, south, and east.
И для этого мы будем стремиться к демилитаризации и денацификации Украины, а также преданию суду тех, кто совершил многочисленные кровавые преступления против мирных жителей, в том числе и граждан Российской Федерации.
Russians starting rolling in tanks into Ukrainian territory and doing precision strikes at that time on airports or on military bases of Ukrainian soldiers. These air sirens are warning citizens about airstrikes. Especially in Kharkiv, that was the first city of intense assault.
As Russian tanks continue to cross into the country, world leaders start to ask, what are Putin's intentions?
The Russian objective will be to get into Kiev and remove that regime. Kiev is the political center of gravity. It's where President Zelensky and the government operate from, so it is the political key to this war.
They tried to do it the way Western forces would have done it, with quite fast-moving, relatively light armoured forces, moving quickly, using air power, using modern technology and cybersecurity, and grabbing the Ukrainian government in Kiev and effecting regime change.
Everybody who is saying, oh, we are afraid of a third world war, well, I have a surprise for you. It already started.
The Ukrainian people now begin to flee the country in their thousands.
We went by car like three days, and we slept in a car because we couldn't find the place where to sleep. So we slept in a car.
Дякуємо.
Все добре, вже все добре. Все добре.
Ага.
To jedyne, co mam rzeknę. Je to tam strasznie, ale nasi chłopcy wojują. Wszystko będzie dobrze. My się nie zdawamy, wszystko w pogodzie.
life-changing decisions are made in an instant. Husbands and fathers staying to fight as women and children escape.
У мене дружина вагітна на 8 місяців, вже 9-й пішов. І я вимушений, дивлячись, які події поруч відбуваються, вже зовсім рядом російські війська, я не можу ризикувати, залишати її в цьому пеклі, тому я зробив все, щоб її вивезти до польського кордону, до Польщі.
Those who can't get out are forced underground.
Мы не знаем, куда упадет ракета, что будет с нашим городом, кто сюда зайдет и как все будет через 5 минут. Поэтому последние несколько дней мы живем в аду.
A country which only days earlier was largely at peace, now in turmoil, because of one man.
The most important thing to remember about Putin is that he is the KGB operative. He comes from the Russian tradition of security services.
Members of the KGB were trained to regard themselves as the last bastion of Soviet power.
He has a reputation, cultivated but credible, of being a street fighter who understands that his credibility rests on carrying through his threats.
Putin's career in the KGB took him to East Germany, where he witnessed the fall of communism.
The Cold War came to an end in 1991. Soviet Union collapsed. All of the newly emergent East European states wanted to join NATO.
I think he has a nostalgia for Russia's history, a feeling that Russia was once a great country, an empire, if you like.
In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia. And from then on, it was clear that President Putin had a design in mind, which we didn't take very seriously, of recreating Russian influence in the old Soviet space. In 2014, he took the biggest step of all towards that by invading Ukraine briefly and grabbing Crimea.
I think Putin sees himself as the savior of Russia. I think he's got a messianic self-belief.
His sense of history is that he is going to be the new Stalin, the new Peter the Great, the new Tsar.
It's a very personalized, almost like Byzantine despotic leadership.
The Russian assault continues unabated. This driver remarkably survived after his car was hit by a Russian tank.
So you were asleep?
Да, я сплю. И вот это вот оно все пролетело. Я не знаю, как я жива осталась. Я не знаю.
Я тут. Ніяку зброю ми не складемо. Будемо захищати нашу державу.
Volodymyr Zelensky was an entertainer. Now he finds himself on the world stage.
Zelensky is an extraordinary figure, a comedian, a comic actor who was condescended to by Putin.
Zelensky's ability to tell a story becomes an irrefutable advantage to the country. This former actor is showing leadership and courage which can't be faked.
An actor leading Ukraine in a war in a very asymmetric way towards Putin, that is just purely trying to deploy its tanks and ballistic missiles into Ukraine, whereas Zelensky, for example, speaks directly to people.
He was called by President Biden and offered a ticket to leave Kiev.
To see the president of that country stand up and say, I don't need transportation, I need arms. That is a quote that will be in history as a brave leader who is staying with his people.
He constantly boosts the morale of the Ukrainian people, especially after rumors fly around the country that he's fled or worse.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут.
His strategic value is that he has turned the international community against Russia on terms that President Putin would never have conceived as possible.
As the situation intensifies, the government appeals for help.
The head of our administration came and said, we think we will be giving away guns. And I said, okay, sign me in for 20. And so then my fellow politicians and I, we went to get the guns. And it was so surreal, you cannot even imagine.
At first, we were scared, really scared. But now we are ready to fight. And fight like hell.
Вони нам поставили умови зараз. Якщо ми починаємо супротив, вони розносять місто артилерії. Якщо за, воює. Хто за те, щоб воювати? Воювати! За те, щоб воювати!
I think many Ukrainians didn't need much galvanizing to reject a Russian invasion.
Домой! Домой!
Always knew that Ukraine would resist. It was clear from 2014 because yes, Putin took over Crimea rather easily, but there was resistance in the rest part of Ukraine.
Это не только военное дело. Каждый гражданин сейчас делает коктейли Молотова, собирает припасы, покупает оружие.
72 hours in, Kiev holds on unexpectedly. It feels like this won't be the quick invasion Putin expected.
The Russians hoped and thought that they could simply drive in with light forces and take the surrender. They found in the face of enormous opposition from the Ukrainian people, they're not going to do that. And the issue we're now confronting is how much of Kiev are they going to have to destroy and how much of the population are they going to have to kill to get to President Zelensky.
Stop fascist Russia! Stop fascist Russia! Solidarity! Putin out! Putin out! USA stand with Ukraine!
The world is standing up.
What do we want? Putin out! Where do we want?
There is a unity amongst many, many countries.
Apple has halted all product sales in Russia.
They are suspending all Russian teams.
They understand the dangers of Putin regime for Europe.
All together, we will win! Arm Ukraine! Arm Ukraine!
Very profound anti-Russian sentiments all over the world.
Ukrainians. Дякую.
President Zelensky is a natural communicator. He has turned the international community against Russia on terms that President Putin would never have conceived as possible.
Long live Ukraine! Long live freedom!
For the first time ever, the European Union will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack. This is a watershed moment.
As the world stands up to Putin, his forces continue to give much of Ukraine a pounding. A menacing 40-mile convoy heads towards the capital. But its progress is slow. Putin's plan seems to be stalling.
Their logistics have failed, so they're running out of fuel and food, and the mud means that large bits of equipment are stuck and holding up the entire convoy.
The Ukrainians are resisting. And Russian armed forces are not doing as well, do not have as high a morale as had been expected.
So now they've gone back to plan A, which is what they normally understand, which is a ground offensive, which moves relatively slowly, surrounds the cities, and pounds them to submission.
He's already facing this humiliation on the battlefield. Because he honestly thought that he'll take Ukraine in 100 hours, or what did he say, 2-3 days, my tanks will be in Kyiv.
He's got a limited number of options if he's backed into a corner. He can cut off the energy supplies to Europe. He can spread chaos elsewhere, or he can threaten or actually go nuclear.
Terrifying.
Absolutely.
Высшие должностные лица ведущих стран НАТО допускают и агрессивные высказывания, приказываю министру обороны и начальнику генерального штаба перевести силы сдерживания российской армии в особый режим несения боевого дежурства.
They have raised the alert status of some of their nuclear weapons in Russia, and the argument they're giving is that that's in response to rhetoric coming out of NATO. So they're not positioning what they're saying as being offensive. They're saying it's a defensive move.
I think we have to take it extremely, extremely seriously. And I am sure, absolutely sure, from having sat around the NATO table, that every single NATO minister is taking it seriously.
With the possibility of literally going nuclear, many began to question Putin's sanity. In recent weeks, Russia's leader seemed increasingly isolated, his behaviour more erratic.
People who have known Mr. Putin over the years in the West say that the person that they knew in 2003, 2010, 2012 was a rational, well-briefed, cool-thinking, aggressive leader.
Putin, you can call him cynical, you can call him, irresponsible, but he has always been quite rational in his actions. Today it is much harder.
There are suggestions he's become increasingly paranoid, spending much of the pandemic isolated. His worldview seems to have become smaller, along with his inner circle.
How sane a person can be with so much power and so little diversity of opinion around his table. Who knows if he's afraid of COVID or an assassination attempt.
When he sits well apart from people, it's, again, part of this syndrome of thinking that only he can save Russia.
Andrei Kortunov has been a Kremlin advisor, but even he is now questioning the sanity of this war.
It's very embarrassing for all of us, not only because we turned out to be wrong, but also because all Russians will be in a difficult position.
Is he evil? I've no idea whether Mr. Putin is evil or not, but what he embraces is clearly evil in the way it is carried out. There is a complete lack of personal compassion for the forces that he unleashes.
Russia has attacked the TV tower in the capital, Kiev.
The problem for us in understanding what's going on in Russia is that most people get their news and have their opinions formed through the television channels. And one of the priorities for Putin, as soon as he became president in 2000, was to control TV output.
Хочу сказать, что специальная военная операция идет в строгом соответствии с графиком, по плану. Все поставленные задачи успешно решаются.
Жители из-за агрессии украинских войск еще 11.
As Putin tells Russia his operation in Ukraine is going to plan, state TV reinforces the message.
We don't know how long it will take for the truth of what's really happening in Ukraine to filter back into Russia. But undoubtedly, one of the reasons that the Russians have found it hard going is that their conscripts are completely unprepared for what they've met, and that the army seems to have been told that you'll be welcomed as liberators, not as occupiers.
It even appears that the Russian troops themselves are misinformed. At the UN, the Ukrainian ambassador reads an unverified text message from a conscript back to his mother.
Мы бьем по всем городам, подряд, даже по мирным жителям. Нам сказали, что они нас будут приветствовать, а они кидаются под нашу технику.
But tensions do rise back in Russia as small pockets of protests break out.
Russia is now under such heavy economic sanctions that its economy will be crippled. Its population is already, quite dissatisfied, and this is just the beginning of it.
The UK is announcing the largest and most severe package of economic sanctions that Russia has ever seen.
We've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets.
We're seeing the true value of harnessing the private sector in ways that really do tell. So sport, culture, banking, law, insurance, all of those things.
Well, Visa and MasterCard are suspending operations. IKEA, the furniture store, has said it is closing its 17 stores.
McDonald's has said it is going to be pausing its operations in Russia.
The sanctions themselves can be incredibly important in turning the tide of this situation and making Russia think again.
Russia has been made a pariah amongst the international community. But is the West doing enough to help Ukraine?
Western foreign policy in general is always caught between the emotion of human rights and a more sober, more brutal, clear-eyed judgment about national security interests.
Ukrainian people are dying, please.
We are a brave nation, but we need help, we need support.
I hope that once we will get the no-fly zone, well, and I'm sure that we will get it at some point, because otherwise we will lose the war.
Establishing a no-fly zone would mean that we would have to watch and monitor, and if violated, give warning and then shoot down whatever aircraft is violating that no-fly zone. Because if you do shoot down a Soviet aircraft, then we're in the war.
Ukraine will try to get as much closer to Europe as is the strategic objective. So, for example, pushing for EU membership.
Zelensky, in my view, has emerged as the man of the 21st century. He has created enormous change by his courage.
We're seeing a gleaming example of someone who's very effective in using all forms of media to get his message across to his own people and internationally.
Zelensky might be rallying the world, but the Ukrainian people want only one question answered. When will this end?
think it is almost inevitable that there will be at least months of civil resistance to Russian forces.
I know that Ukraine, first of all, will not surrender the way Putin imagined in his mind. And I see a mobilization on this horizontal level, Ukrainians helping each other. This is invincible.
Everyone is so bonded with Ukraine, and everyone wants this to work out for them to have a country to which to return, and hope that their resilience and their spirit will not die.
Yeah, of course, I'm depressed. I think many of us are depressed. I think that there are many people in the Kremlin who should be depressed. We can talk about the collateral damage, about sanctions, about many things. But the grim reality is that there are losses of human lives.
I should definitely say that the bravery of Ukrainians changed Ukraine and changed the world. Our security does not come for free. And I think Ukraine demonstrates that it's worth dying for this.
I think this is the war that has changed the world. Europe has rediscovered itself in less than 2 weeks, and it's reminded us that the prosperity and freedoms of Europe can't be taken for granted.